any of you say that my earrings are reputation coded, I'm gonna block you. Hey Hodies, welcome to my channel. My name is hautemesstom and thank you so much for clicking on this video. Today what we're going to do is I'm going to look back at my purchases of November of last year, 2022. That's why the title says 2022. I know what year it is. Do you? What I like to do is to reflect on those purchases and think about whether or not they were good or not 1 year later. Do I even still have the product? If I decluttered it, why did I declutter it? And how can I use this information to make better purchases in the future? If you happen to be new to my channel, I would love to have you subscribe. I also have a Patreon if you want to do that. But most of all, if you could like this video and leave a comment, that's the most helpful thing you could do for me. Merch is also linked down below if you're into that. Last November, I purchased 3 makeup items, and only one of them still exists in my makeup collection, and it's the first thing we're going to talk about. The first thing I bought last November was the Makeup by Mario Ethereal Eyes palette. Mine's from the original launch. I remember whenever I got the email that this was coming out, I remember sharing on my Patreon just like a screenshot of the email and I said, for science, and I've never looked back. Also, I'm sorry that my voice is a little bit strained. I've not been feeling really well the past couple of days. I'm congested. I can't hear out of my right ear right now, so I'm doing my best to do my work in this world. So I apologize if it's like a little hard to hear and listen to. I understand. I've gotten on really well with this palette, and if you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know that I regularly pull out this palette. You can also see the divots that I have in some of the shades. Like I really utilize this palette quite a bit. Whether I'm using the shimmers in it or not, I really like the matte formula in here. I've gotten a lot of use out of this, and that's really important. And that's a thing that I like to see when I buy an eyeshadow palette. You may or may not know this, but I am on this journey kind of like moving away from eyeshadow palettes, but I'm not even like moving into a BYO situation. Like my eye look today is a really good representation of what I've been into. I'm using some mattes from Hindash. I'm using some matte from Victoria Beckham. You know, I'm like using some mattes and then I'm putting a very special shade on my eye. And that's just kind of the star of the show. And that's kind of what I've been doing. But that's how I'm exploring color. That's how I'm enjoying texture and things like that. So that's what I've been doing a lot recently. And this palette is kind of like a very good base for that. But I also really love the ethereal shimmers in here. I find them to be really, really beautiful, but I also kind of stand by the fact that it's not something like revolutionary. You probably have beautiful ethereal shades if you're already into that. But what Makeup by Mario did is kind of really put it all into one concise palette. And for someone like me who got a lot of use out of it, who still gets a lot of use out of it, like 1 year later, I'm still using this palette a lot. You see it linked down below. For a long time, it wasn't available. It's, I think, still currently available as I talk about this. Another thing that I really like about this palette is having only ever like interacted with the other eyeshadow palettes like at Sephora, both when I worked there and, you know, since I've gone on visits. This palette is like a metal material, and it's much heavier and feels much more consumer based than Makeup by Mario's other makeup, which feels very designed to be very light and work in a makeup kit, which makes sense because like that's his background. But what I really appreciate about it is that this feels like it's while it's still compact and like easy to take around, like I've traveled with this palette before, it still feels more like it was made for me as like a makeup lover, as opposed to being high performing makeup that I just happen to enjoy. It like checks all of the boxes for me. And so yeah, I really think this was a really good purchase. One of the reasons I purchased it is that, well, I have the Viseart palette and I also had the Beautopsy palette from Hindash. I think because they lack something else other than the mattes, I feel like this becomes like a palette I reach for often because it often just is the solution. I'm often using it in its entirety, but I even think to use it when I am not using those shimmers and I want to use like one of my Cleona shades or one of my indie shades or just a beautiful shade from another eyeshadow palette. This is just something that gets an incredible amount of play in my collection. I can't look back a year ago and say that it was a bad purchase. I want to say this though, because I know that this is like a much coveted product and people still haven't decided whether or not they want it. You have to be very real with yourself. Is like, this added a lot of value because I don't have another neutral palette like this. And I really like that wet look eyeshadow. I don't really play with a lot of color anymore, so that's why this has felt worthwhile to me. You, on the other hand, might be someone who loves color or whatever. So you just to be very honest with yourself. I also know this palette is pretty expensive. So do you really want to part with 70 of your hard-earned dollars for this? It's just very possible that you're not going to get the same usage out of it that I do. No looking back, no regrets. I really, really enjoyed this palette and I foresee myself continuing to use it. There'll be a day where I hit pan in this, and sometimes whenever I buy eyeshadows, I don't foresee that, but I do foresee this being a palette that like in a year or two, we're gonna start seeing a lot of pan in it at that time, and that will feel very, very lovely. And the only thing about whenever you start seeing pan in some of the shades, it's like you keep using it, and then you might pan a whole shade and you're like, do I want to use the rest of these shades now? Anyway, that's something for me to figure out down the line. But for right now, very, 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 very handy palette. The next thing I purchased, I no longer have, so I will quickly put a picture. I'll scooch over. A picture will pop up here. It is the Charlotte Tilbury Hypnotizing Pop Shot in the shade Cosmic Rocks. If you were here in my last month's video where I did this, I talked about how I bought Smoky Quartz. I really love Smoky Quartz. Smoky Quartz is like something that I really, really love, something that I still hold in high value and high regard from my makeup collection. Like, it's a very great shade. Love it. Falls like kind of right into that ethereal eyes, but it has a lot more pigment to it, but lots of just texture to it. I bought this, and I'm going to tell you right now that I should never have bought this for a number of reasons. Not always, but for most of the time, if I buy something and I really love the formula and I really love everything about it, the main reason it's probably my favorite thing is because I picked the right shade. Now, obviously you can still review things even if you don't like the shade. You can talk about formula and texture and all of those things. However, so I bought Smoky Quartz, love Smoky Quartz, and I'm like, I want to buy all of these. And I didn't really actually want to buy all of these, but I picked this one because I liked the color of it. The second problem in lies me picking this, I bought this because I was like, I don't wear a lot of blue eyeshadow. If this is just like Smoky Quartz, I'm gonna start wearing more blue eyeshadow. That turned out to not be true. Not only that, Cosmic Rocks and Smoky Quartz, just formula and finish wise, were a little bit different. Cosmic Rocks, the texture in it was a lot more finely milled, so it wasn't like a bunch of different sizes of sparkle sparkling back at you, which I really like, that those different sizes of sparkle, because that tends to be what catches the light and make the light twinkle on your eyes. Well, like a more consistent sparkle still will do that, but in like a less intense way. And I love intense sparkle. So not only is it in a shade that I don't like, the finish isn't really quite the same as the one that I really loved. And I did start wearing blue eyeshadow more because of it. I think I wore this eyeshadow twice before I decided to declutter it, because it was just like, I knew I was never going to use it again. Not only that, that color, that kind of duochrome, because it was kind of like a shifty duochrome to purple, isn't really unique to my collection. I have a lot of indie single eyeshadows, and I know for sure I have like a blue one that shifts purple, or vice versa, a purple one that shifts blue, and I also don't use that one that much. I don't mind keeping like one of those things on hand, but this came in its own little component, which I think is great. I do like one and done single shadows, like where they come in like a single component. That was another thing. Often when I use Smoky Quartz, I'm not using it in conjunction with other eyeshadows. I'm just kind of like smearing it all over my lid, blending out the edges, and I'm like, that is eyeshadow. I could not do that with this. The blue was too bright. I like, if I'm going to do a one and done shadow, it's not normally a lighter color. I typically like a deeper color, like a gray, something very sooty. You know, that's what I really, really like if I'm gonna do one and done. Most other lighter colors, I like to build the smokiness around it and then put like that thing on the lid or like on the inner portion of my eyelid, like closer to my nose. And this just didn't do any of the things for me. I did not pay full price for it though. I had a Beautylish gift card because I had bought Sonia G brushes, and it was like I bought them during one of their gift card events where like every time you spend $100 you get like a $20 gift card. I didn't pay the full $34, but I really kind of wish I didn't spend my $20 gift card on this and I hadn't purchased it. So I do actually regret this, because, and that doesn't always happen. I, at that time, even knew better. I got sucked up into the hype of my own love of Smoky Quartz, and you know, this is something that I learned from, and I'm trying to avoid doing this in the future. I can't say I'm going to be perfect at it, but this is something where like I look back and I'm like, oh, I just wish I wouldn't had done that. I wish I would have bought another brush from Sonia G, or I would have saved it until there was something on the Beautylish website that I would have thought more about and would have been able to come to a better conclusion that that was going to be a very, very good purchase for me. Also, the next thing that I'm going to talk about, I no longer have in my possession. It is the Natasha Denona Midi Retro Glam palette. And so this came out, I think I bought it at the launch. Thinking back on this purchase, okay, I'll tell you why I bought it, the mindset in which I bought it. Even though I'm decluttering, or I have decluttered it since, like I still have it right now, but I'm working to declutter it in my like fond farewell series. I really like the mini retro palette from Natasha Denona. I love the desaturated green in it. The shade Galaxia is in it, which is a really great shade from Natasha. It's like one of Natasha, it's like in the best Natasha Denona shimmer formula. It's like a really, really beautiful shade. I was really disappointed in the original Midi Glam because the Midi Glam was pink, and while there are like two soft pinks in the mini glam, it didn't feel like an extension of the same thought of what the mini retro was. Like when you just look at those two palettes next to each other, it's like these did not come out of the same thought. If I were designing the mini retro, it would be more green than pink, but still have some pink in it, you know. And but it was like Natasha Denona was just like it was always meant to be pink, and I did like that. So then this got sneak peeked and launched, and it did pique my interest because it was more into the greens. If there is to be an eyeshadow color that I'm like willing to like play with that isn't neutral, it's green. Like greens and oranges are like two shades where like if it's not neutral, I will play with those colors on my eyes a little bit more, especially like together. Also, like I like green and pink together a lot too because they're not exactly complementary, but they're like very close. I think they look really good together. So this got released, and I think like the thing that happened is that everything was desaturated in this, but these were like blue greens, and like I feel like the green that was in the mini retro was more of like just a desaturated straight green as opposed to being like these blue leaning greens. Not only that, once I got this in my hands, I was like there wasn't, it was just like no texture to it. Now not everyone's looking for texture, but as I previously mentioned with the Makeup by Mario palette, the reason I like it as texture, the reason I like Smoky Quartz over Cosmic Rocks is because I like the texture in it. It's something that Natasha Denona is very typically good at in her palettes, is like exploring texture. So in the mini retro palette, there is a lot of texture in there, even though it's 5 shades. And then we get this bigger version, this retro glam, and it has shimmers in it, but they were just like straightforward shimmers. They weren't really exciting shimmers, but like we had seen previously, like in the gold palette, in the sunset palette, like Natasha Denona knows how to do texture pretty well. And so for it to be a bunch of these like blue leaning greens in there with like these uninteresting textures, I just felt like I couldn't make like eye looks that I was really interested in. There were a couple gray shades in there, and I ended up really enjoying playing with those when I had it, but ultimately after a couple of uses and like doing my review of it, I was entirely disinterested in using it past then. Asking myself the question, do I think it was a good purchase? I don't think it was a bad purchase, right? My channel was at a point where like, you know, doing those kinds of reviews, it's like a little bit worthwhile, like brings more eyes to the channel whenever I talk about new things. So, and that way it did its job. And I do think my thought process of purchasing it, because it seemed like it was going to be the answer to what I wanted the midi retro to be, and it turned out to not be that. Like I don't think I would have known unless I like had gotten the opportunity to play with it. But also I think like I still like remember looking at it and being really excited about it when I first saw it. So purchasing it and like using it and testing it and then finding out that it didn't work for me I don't think that it was exactly like a purchase that was an absolute mistake. Was it my best purchase? No. But I wouldn't have known that it wasn't a good purchase unless I had tried it. Now that's not to say that I need to try everything. Unlike the last shade, like talking about Cosmic Rocks and the shade I just talked about from Charlotte Tilbury, all of the things I knew better. I knew a lot better than to buy that shade, right? Like, you know, Don't Wearing Blue, whatever. I wouldn't have been able to know those textures without playing with that palette, and I wouldn't have ended up learning that it was a bad palette for me until then. I do think, though, had I not purchased it, I don't think I ever also would have felt like it was something that ever got away from me. Although I think you can still buy this palette. I'm not sure if it's limited edition or not, or like that it will go away at any point. But just from my experience, like with it, like I think if I just like had sat on it for a bit and I didn't think about it as something that I could use on my channel, I don't think I would have purchased it. So and I also didn't really voraciously review it on my channel either. It was something that I did my first impressions of, and then I think I like reviewed it later when I was reviewing my budget for that month, and I was just like, I don't really like it. And then I kind of just decluttered it. So that's what happened there. I'm not gonna belittle myself the way that I feel like I made the mistake of buying Cosmic Rocks. Like they don't feel like on the same level. Anyway, kept today's video a little bit shorter because I'm just not feeling super well. But if you happen to be new to my channel, hi, welcome. If you didn't catch the vibe throughout this whole thing, what I like to do on my channel is try to be very discerning about the makeup I bring into my makeup collection while loving on the makeup that I've already purchased. I am a growing channel, so I have been getting more opportunities for PR and that, but I still try to love my collection first and foremost. And then now that I get PR, it does afford me the opportunities to review things that I might not have otherwise purchased. But I like to build the habit here and help you build the habit, like I build the habit for myself and help you build the habit of just being more discerning about the purchases we're making when it comes to makeup. We all know that makeup goes bad. I'm a proponent of just using my makeup, and if I'm not using it, then it needs to find a new home. So if that's the kind of content you're into, I'd love to have you subscribe. Make sure you like this video. I'm on patreon.com if you'd like to support me there. I do additional content over there. You can check that out. It's patreon.com/hautemesstom. There's obviously no pressure. Your hard-earned money is your hard-earned money, and you don't have to throw that my way if you don't want to, and I will not feel any kind of way. It's one of those things where you pay what you will. Every patron at every level gets the same content. My weekly podcast with Kackie of Kackie Reviews Beauty lives on there. And I also do additional content for me, myself, and I. So you can check that out if you would like. Merch is linked down below if you're into merch. And you can follow me on Instagram at hautemesstom if you're into Instagram. There's no pressure to, I don't post on my grid a lot, but I actually am going to do Messmas this year. Messmas is just where, you know, I'm posting every day, but I'm going to do it in short form content. I'm not going to do long form content. So if you want to see that, I would head to Instagram because it's going to be photos, reels, and flat lays. So you can follow me there. I probably won't post on Instagram again on my grid until then, but I do post on my stories if you want to like see some more fluid thought coming out of my brain. I appreciate you all so much for watching. Remember to follow your hoe and you will find me. I'll see you in a video very soon. Bye-bye.